Several countries in Europe have reported coronavirus infection rates higher than during the first wave of the pandemic. In France, the government has imposed a 6-week overnight curfew on 2/3 of the country. The United States recorded more than 80,000 new cases on Friday, its highest daily increase since the pandemic began. Democrat candidate Joe Biden has pledged a free coronavirus vaccine for all if he becomes president. Sudan is to normalise relations with Israel, the third Arab League state to do so in the last few months. The deal was announced by Donald Trump from the White House. Palestinians have described it as another stab in the back. Protests are spreading across Poland after a court ruling banned virtually all abortions, with exceptions only for cases of rape, incest, or where the mother's health is at risk.
The key U.S. indexes ended mixed Friday. The Dow Jones Industrials fell 28 points to 28,335. The Nasdaq Composite gained 42 points. The S&P 500 rose 11. Both the Dow and Nasdaq lost around 1% for the week. The S&P fell 0.5%. White House officials and Democratic leaders are continuing negotiations over a nearly $2 trillion coronavirus relief package. Investors are increasingly optimistic that a second dose of stimulus will be delivered, even if many think the odds of a deal before the November 3rd election are slim. Money managers say the markets are likely to lack clear direction between now and the election. They believe the focus will be more on earnings and economic reports amid worries that rising coronavirus cases could slow the economic recovery. Shares of American Express fell 3.6% after the company's third quarter profit missed expectations. Intel stock tumbled more than 10% as the chip giant reported lower quarterly earnings and revenue. We have more on today's market activity and market analysis.
British pharmaceutical giant AstraZeneca says it will resume trials of its experimental coronavirus vaccine in the United States. The firm says American regulators have authorized the restart. AstraZeneca is working with Oxford University to develop the vaccine. The firm is one of the leading vaccine developers. It suspended its trials in September after one participant developed an unexplained illness, but testing in Britain resumed last month. The company said Friday the Food and Drug Administration had approved the restart in the U.S. after reviewing all safety data from the trials. AstraZeneca made an agreement with the Japanese government in August to provide doses for at least 60 million people. It wants to make doses available for 15 million people by next March. Johnson & Johnson says it also plans to resume its clinical tests. The company suspended its trials on October 12th to carry out a safety review. The American firm said Friday an independent panel recommended that tests be resumed. The company announced that preparations for the restart are now underway. It says it began to prepare after consulting with the FDA. Meanwhile, data from Johns Hopkins University in the U.S. shows the total number of cases around the world has topped 42 million. Over 1.1 million people have died. People from Japan and the United States have attended a memorial ceremony for soldiers who died in a fierce battle during World War II. Relatives of the dead and government officials from both countries gathered on the Pacific island of Kyoto on Saturday. The joint Japan-U.S. ceremony is usually held every March, but this year's event was delayed because of the coronavirus pandemic. Kyoto is also known as Iwo Jima. The island was the site of a savage battle between Japanese and U.S. troops in 1945. Around 21,900 Japanese soldiers and about 6,800 U.S. servicemen lost their lives.
I'm deeply concerned that the memories of the fierce battle are gradually fading away. Those who survived have a responsibility and an obligation to pass on to future generations the lesson that war brings misfortune to humans.
We remember and honor the Americans and the Japanese who fought here, were wounded, or gave their lives for love of their country.
35 people attended the ceremony. The number of participants is normally much higher. The attendees observed a moment of silence and maintained a distance from one another. A memorial service was held on Saturday for the father of Yokota Megumi, a Japanese national abducted by North Korean agents in 1977. Yokota Shigeru passed away in June. Relatives of other Japanese abductees and government officials took part in the service in Tokyo. Yokota's wife Sakie described her husband as a quiet father and good family man, but she added that he became a man of steely determination after their daughter's disappearance. She also said she believes Megumi is alive and well, and she urged the government to spare no effort to bring the abductees home.
We want those who feel the same as we do to do everything they can to resolve the abduction issues. We believe and pray that the day will come.
For 20 years, the couple spearheaded efforts to rescue the abductees. They visited every prefecture in the country, giving speeches and collecting signatures. The head of a group of abductees' relatives and the brother of abductee Taguchi Yaiko lamented the lack of progress. Izuka Shigeo said they have not yet achieved their goal despite many years of trying. He said many of the family members are growing infirm with age, but he also said he will carry on in gratitude to Shigeru. Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide was among the attendees.
Resolving the issue is the top priority for my cabinet. As Prime Minister, I will take the lead and carve out a path without missing any opportunity.
After the service, the relatives held their first large rally in about a year. It ended with the adoption of a resolution calling on Pyongyang to immediately return all the abductees and on Tokyo to get them back. The Japanese government says North Korean agents kidnapped at least 17 Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 80s. The North repatriated 5 of them in 2002, but the rest remain unaccounted for. The Walt Disney Company has revised a content advisory notice that warns viewers about racist stereotypes in some of its classic films. The firm altered the warning earlier this month. It appears at the beginning of a movie when viewers access the film on the Disney Plus streaming service. The message says this program includes negative depictions and/or mistreatment of people or cultures. These stereotypes were wrong then and are wrong now. The company's website also explains those statements in detail. It says the 1953 film Peter Pan depicts indigenous people in a stereotypical manner. It also mentions the 1970 film The Aristocats. It says a cat with slanted eyes and buck teeth in the movie is a racist caricature of East Asian peoples with exaggerated stereotypical traits. Walt Disney added a short warning about outdated cultural depictions in some of its films last November, but this time the firm used stronger language in the advisory notice. The action comes amid the anti-racism movement in the U.S. entertainment industry. The movement was sparked by the death of a black man in police custody in May. That incident led to massive protests across the United States. Belarusians living in Japan have marched in solidarity with protesters back home who are challenging the results of August's presidential election. They called on President Alexander Lukashenko to resign. About 40 protesters gathered in Tokyo's Hibiya Park on Saturday. They carried red and white flags, which have become a symbol of protest in Belarus. And they called for an end to violence against civilians.
It's important that we support them even though we are far apart. We may have lived outside Belarus for years, but we are Belarusians in our hearts. We cannot ignore what's happening there.
The former Soviet Republic has been rocked by protests since Lukashenko won his 6th term in August. Opposition claimed the election was rigged. Exiled opposition leader Svetlana Tsikhanovskaya has warned of a nationwide strike unless Lukashenko announces his resignation by Sunday. A ceremony was held on Saturday to mark the completion of the Tokyo Aquatics Center. The venue will host swimming competitions next year at the postponed Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games. The metropolitan government spent about $540 million on the facility. It has 15,000 seats. The building was completed in February, but the ceremony was postponed for 7 months due to the coronavirus pandemic. The 50-meter pool has movable sides. The length and depth of the bottom can also be changed. Japanese swimming star Ike Rikako took a splash in the pool. Last year, she revealed that she had been diagnosed with leukemia. The ace returned to competition 2 months ago. Ike said when she saw the pool, she got the feeling that the games are coming.